Okay, so we have talked now already about the engineering design cycle, design process related to requirement specifications. And after you specify the requirements, the next stage in the design process is concept generation and evaluation. So this is the creative, a big creative part of the design cycle. Um, all too often, engineers are going to start with a single solution in mind to a problem, and then they're going to pursue it as the only possibility, the only possible solution. And that's not a good approach. We need to be creative. We need to generate a variety of possible designs, and we need to evaluate a variety of different designs. So we're going to today talk a little bit about creative methods to systematically generate ideas and evaluate ideas in a way that is going to allow you to be able to defend your design. In essence, why did you choose the ideas that you chose? So this is a fun process, I think. It also will help you professionally because companies want to employ innovative engineers. You always hear about innovation in engineering, and that's really where this comes into play, is the concept generation and evaluation stage. Um, this process also, by becoming an, I hate to say it, but out of the box thinker, it's going to help you develop your engineering judgment and become a better engineer. So in this lecture today, we're going to be talking specifically about this section here of the engineering design process. Sorry, this section here about the engineering design process, concept generation. So what are we going to talk about concept generation? We're going to understand the importance of creativity, innovation, concept generation, and critical evaluation in engineering design. We're going to talk about some of the barriers that hinder creativity in this process. We're going to apply some strategies and formal methods to generate concepts or solutions to a problem. And then finally, we're going to apply some specific design techniques for the evaluation of the design concepts that we do generate through these strategies and formal methods that we'll learn. So I want you to start with some kind of brain warm-up activity. What we want to do is consider the diagram that I'm presenting here, and you can think of this as a coin on a shovel. I've got this coin here, and then these lines form some sort of shovel. You can think of them as matches and a quarter or something if you want. The task that I want you to do is to move just two of the lines such that you still have a coin shape and a shovel shape, but the coin is no longer inside of the shovel. We can see that this coin is inside of the shovel portion of the shape. And so I want you to kind of pause the video and try to solve this little brain teaser. What do you need to do to get the coin outside of the shovel? So hit pause, give yourself a couple minutes to solve this. Once you have got a solution, go ahead and hit play. I'm going to, spoiler alert, I'm going to show you the solution now. So the first is that you're going to move that line to here, and the second is that you're going to move that line to there. So now we have a coin and a shovel. The coin located outside of the shovel. You may have struggled with this task, and success rate on this task is not very high. Most people struggle with it, and that is because of an artificial barrier that they put on themselves. This motion right there, the motion of that line to there, we only moved it half a spot. And for some reason, a lot of people approach this problem with motions like that in their mind, where the match has to, or the stick has to move a full position. That wasn't stated as a requirement. All we said was that you had to move two of the lines, but a lot of us have preconceived notions that the line should move further than a half position, meaning we put an artificial constraint on our thinking and solution process that we only wanted to move toothpicks or matches completely. We didn't consider half motions. So I'm going to present another challenge to you, and here what I want you to do is uh, draw 4 lines, and the 4 lines have to pass through all 9 of the dots that I'm showing here. The constraint that you have to abide by is that the pen you use to draw these lines can't come off the paper. So once that pen touches the paper, you can't lift it off. So again, pause the video, take a minute, and reproduce these sets of dots on your own paper and see if you can generate a solution to this. So take 5 minutes, pause the video. I'm not going to present the solution to this one. I don't want to give it away. So if you think you got it, come visit me in my office. We can talk about it and understand how maybe you came to that solution. Um, If you do know how to do it, don't spoil it for others, please. Let them find out the solution on their own. Um, Another puzzle. What image do you see presented here? This is a very classic creativity puzzle that's presented to people studying creative methods, and I just want you to look at this, and what do you see? Just remember in your mind, what does this image look like to you? So now what I want to do is talk about some of the barriers that the activities that you just participated in exposed. And there are typically four types of barriers that limit technical creativity. So these are shown by research. The first is that we have perceptual blocks. Those are blocks that prevent people from clearly seeing the problem for what it is. A very common perceptual block is the tendency to delimit the problem space, meaning that we put constraints on problems that don't exist, and that coin and shovel problem is often an issue of perceptual blocking, meaning that we didn't clearly see the problem for what it is because of artificial constraints. A second type of perceptual block is the tendency to stereotype or to see biased towards a particular solution. We see this a lot in engineering, for example. If you've used a microcontroller in the past to serve a certain type of problem, you tend to think similar problems in the future need to be solved by applying a microcontroller, and you limit the design decisions. Another perceptual block is of a problem is the difficulty of isolating or identifying the true problem. So I want you to think back to the picture we looked at the last slide. What did you see? Your answer might be, I saw a young woman. And then the person sitting next to you, if you were watching this with a buddy, might say, a young woman? I saw an old woman. What are you talking about? And here I've got some shaded depictions of those two, of that same picture. It's just been shaded differently. And you can see here we have two equally valid presentations. On the left side, we have a young woman, one woman kind of looking up and away. This is her face. This is her hair. She's got some sort of feather in her hair. On the right image, we've got an old woman who is looking down and left. This is her eye. This is her other eye. This is actually her nose. This is her mouth. And she's wearing some sort of shawl. And this is her hair. She's got some sort of feather in her hair or something like that. So, same picture, but it just presents two equally valid interpretations. One's not right, one's not wrong. It's just we had difficulty seeing both of them at the same time. It tends to be that you can't see both images initially until they're shown to you. You tend to focus only on one, even that they're both there. So another example of a perceptual block. The second barrier to creativity in technical domains that is commonly identified is the fear of failure. Have you ever had an idea but were afraid to express it because you didn't want to be criticized? Without taking the emotional risk of failing, the best ideas are often left on the table. And so to really succeed, you have to at least take a risk that failure is a possibility. Another emotional block for many engineers is the fear of chaos and disorganization. Often the creative process is disorganized. It's not a neat scientific approach, and the fact that it isn't often numeric and quantitative, and it's a little bit chaotic, tends to be a problem for a lot of engineers who dislike chaotic and disorganized processes. Another emotional block is to simply reject lower quality ideas. Often good ideas actually grow out of bad ones, and good creative approaches mean that we discuss bad ideas before our minds settle on good ones. This occurs because our minds are building on previous ideas, and sometimes because it takes time for creative ideas to incubate or to germinate into an aha moment. So a lot of times as engineers, we hear an initial bad idea, and emotionally we just reject it. We just say, "Oh, that's stupid," and we shouldn't do that. Right? We should discuss what's good and bad about those ideas instead. Environmental blocks are things in our environment that limit creative ability. This could be poor teamwork, where the group members distrust and criticize one another. This could be autocratic management styles of somebody who's in charge. There's cultural biases against creativity. In engineering, the word creativity often conjures the idea of non-scientific methods, often because engineers like to think that there's a single correct solution to the problem. And while it's true that creativity and brainstorming don't solve engineering processes alone, they are absolutely necessary to the engineering design process, and so we have some cultural biases as engineers often about the creative process. The last area of barriers that we see are intellectual and expressive blocks, and these are a barrier to creativity as well. By this we mean that engineering designers need to have an understanding of intellectual tools that are applied to solve a problem. For example, math is a universal language for expressing and solving scientific problems. If you don't have the ability to express yourself in the language and the techniques of the discipline, you're going to have a hard time being creative. So you've got to actually intellectually understand the domain in which you're operating on. Here I've got a bunch of math gobbledygook. I'll admit to you, I don't know what this means, and I probably couldn't contribute creatively to the field where this math is important. It is meaningful, however. So to other people, this symbology, this language of the discipline allows them to communicate and express creative ideas. I know math, it doesn't sound like you can be creative with math equations, but you're stating ideas. And so to be able to do that, you have to know the language of the discipline. Engineers tend to be good at a type of thinking that we call vertical thinking, or sometimes this is called convergent thinking. And what we mean by this is that they are good at taking a problem and proceeding logically to the solution. This is typically a linear process where the engineer starts at the highest level and successfully refines elements of the design to solve the problem. This is usually based upon experience solving similar problems and conventional tools that are employed in a particular area. In contrast, the object of lateral or divergent thinking is to identify creative solutions. We're not concerned with developing the solution for the problem or the right solution to the problem. Instead, the purpose is to jump around from idea to idea. Think, I don't know what I'm looking for until I've found it. It's a journey, right? So for example, take the first puzzle that I'm presenting to you here. The objective here is to develop a plausible scenario that explains how the situation could happen. So a body is discovered in a park in Chicago in the middle of summer. It has a fractured skull and many other broken bones, but the cause of death was hypothermia. How could these seemingly contradictory things be true? So what I want you to do is take a minute and develop a plausible scenario for that example. So pause the video, take 5 minutes, think about that first example and how it could possibly be true. So spoiler alert, I'm going to give you the solution, or a solution, right? There's not just one. Maybe a person stowed away in the wheel compartment of a jet plane. While in flight, because he was at high altitude, he froze and he died of hypothermia. When the plane was preparing to land in Chicago, it lowers its landing gear. The wheels are in the lowered position that causes the body to fall out. He lands in the park. The fall of the dead body breaks all his bones and fractures his skull after he's already been dead. So, plausible scenario of this event demonstrates a little bit of lateral thinking, right? There's not one solution. You're kind of bouncing around. So what I want you to do is practice, maybe with a friend, come up with an example for how the second scenario could be true. A man is returning from Switzerland by train. If he had been in a non-smoking car, he would have died on that train trip. So come up with an answer. Tell a buddy in 38001 and listen to what their response is as well. So vertical thinking focuses on sequential steps towards a solution and tries to determine the correctness of the solution throughout the process. In contrast, lateral thinking is nonlinear, jumping around between steps with no attempt to discern between right and wrong solutions. As such, lateral thinking tends to follow a least likely path to a solution with a goal to develop as many solutions as possible. Vertical thinking follows the most likely path, attempting to narrow down to a single solution. Lateral thinking is what we want to use in the creativity process. It should be done in groups, and so we need to use lateral group thinking for the concept generation phase. Group brainstorming tends to be most effective for developing concepts, for generating new product ideas, for coming up with new features, and for figuring out new ways to combine different technologies. In groups, ideas are readily built upon by other team members, and this really enhances the overall process. So we want to think laterally, we want to think in groups while we're doing these creative process generation ideas. So, maybe that sounds a little bit inactionable to you. So in addition to lateral thinking in groups, there are some valuable really straightforward strategies that can be employed to enhance your creative processes. And the first is I want you to approach the process or the idea generation process with a questioning attitude. Why do trees have leaves? Why is the sky blue? Is there a way to replace the microcontroller in this design? If I use a microcontroller, are there other features that I can achieve? Is there a better microcontroller to use for this particular application than the one that I've selected on? You need to practice being creative through conscious effort. Try to solve brain teasers or thought puzzles. View art, read books, paint, draw, listen to different types of music. Um, seemingly crazy ideas can lead to valuable solutions. So in this process, you need to suspend judgment in the brainstorming process. Try to turn that part of your brain off that always criticizes and rejects. Additionally, the creative process needs time for incubation. So set aside time to reflect on the problem. Go for a walk, have a cup of tea, do some sort of activity that allows your mind to wander. You know, I tend to walk around the lake behind the building when I have a creative process that I need to think about. Finally, a technique can be think like a beginner. New solutions often come from novices because they don't have preconceived notions about what the solution should look like. A more formal technique that kind of embodies some of these suggestions is called the scamper method. Can new elements be substituted for those that exist? Can existing items be combined in new ways? Can parts of the whole be adapted to operate differently? Can part or all of a system be modified? Can it be made smaller? Can it be made bigger? Are there other applications where the system can be used? Can parts of the whole be eliminated? Should the whole thing itself be eliminated? Can elements of the system be rearranged to work better? Are there any roles or objectives that can be reversed in the process? So some strategies to kind of help you think creatively. So I'm going to stop the video here. I'm going to break it into a couple. So this is the end of part one. Thanks for your attention.